Good morning, mathematicians. Today we are going to review a skill that you learned back in middle school. And so I just want to show you very quickly how to make a table from an equation. So notice that I have an equation here. And eventually we're going to talk about the different types of equations that these are. But these are also called functions because they will graph in a way that a function does. And we're going to be learning about that. But I want to remind you how to put these together. So if I want to make a table, first thing that I need to do is I need to draw a table for myself. Now I do like to be a little bit organized. I think that's just kind of a thing for me. So notice that when I'm making a table, I always have the x on the left side. The y is always on the right side. Then I actually write my equation or my function on the inside, y equals 3x. Now the cool thing about having an x and a y variable that don't have values is you get to make them up. And so you actually get to decide what are the values that you put in for x. Now don't go crazy and do something like 5,672 because then that's just a really big number to multiply. I usually start with a -1, a 0, and a 1. So then I know what happens to my equation when I have 0. I see what happens when I have a negative, and I see what happens when I have a positive, and my values are small enough that it doesn't take a lot of work to do that multiplication. Now, what this means is x is now -1. I've decided it's -1. So if it is -1, that means wherever there is an x, I'm going to substitute in -1. Well, 3 times -1 is a -3. There's our first point. Now we would actually graph that because remember this is -1, -3. That is a point that we can graph on a coordinate plane. Okay, let's go ahead and plug in 0. So now, you know, that one's done. So now I'm going to decide what is y if x is 0. And so I'm going to substitute in my 0. And 3 times 0 is 0. Oh, look, it stays 0. That means something. That means it's proportional. Again, we'll talk more about that later. Okay, now I'm going to try and see what happens when I have a 1. With x is 1. I substitute in my 1. 3 times 1 is 3. Now I could, since I have 3 points here, go ahead and graph this. But we'll save that for another video. Okay, now we are, as we get into more complicated math, we are going to be working on quadratic functions. And we still do the same thing. Notice that there are x values and there are y values. So again, I'm going to set up my table. I need to give myself a little more space on the inside of this one. Remember, x always on the left, y on the right, and my equation in the middle. Now you're welcome just to do 2x squared minus 3x plus 4. So you know, because you know it's going to be y equals, up to you, as long as you're being organized. Now again, I do want to be organized with my numbers, so I'm going to do a -1, and I'm going to substitute in. So wherever there is an x, I'm going to put a -1 instead. So I'm going to do 2 times a -1 squared minus 3 times a -1 plus 4. Now this one requires a little bit more work. Remember to use our order of operations. If you need help, there's a poster up on the wall. Now, -1 squared is -1 times -1, which is a positive 1. So now I have 2 times 1. Then I have a -3 times a -1, which ends up being a positive 3 and a positive 4. So 2 times 1 is 2, plus 3 is 5, plus 4 is 9. So if I put a -1 in for my x values, I end up with a y of 9. So I could plot this point, -1, 9. Let's do one more. You usually want to have at least 3 points. I mean, you can get away with a 2, but knowing that this is a quadratic equation, then no, 2 are not going to be enough. But again, that's another unit. Okay, let's try a positive number this time. Let's try 3. Let's see what happens when we substitute 3 in. So now I'm going to have 2 times 3 to the second minus 3 times 3 plus 4. Okay, well, 3 to the second means 3 times 3, which is 9. Then 9 times 2 is 18. minus 3 times 3 is 9, plus 4. Okay, well 18 minus 9 is 9, plus 4 is 13. So my point is 3, 13, and I could graph that. Okay, let's try one more. This is another type of function that we will see. Notice something interesting here. Where is our x value? It is our exponent. So I am still going to make my table. X is always on the left, y is on the right. And this time, I'm going to have y equals 2 to the x. So this is why it's important that we remember some of our exponent rules. And don't worry, we'll cover them again. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put in I'm not going to do -1 because this putting an exponent of -1 is a 2a concept, so I won't go there yet. I'll teach you in 2a. So let's go ahead and stick with 0 and 1 and 2. Okay, so if I have x is 0, so now I have y equals 2 to the 0. Well, if you remember from 8th grade, any number to the 0 power is negative, oh sorry, not negative, is 1. Okay, now I'm going to put in y equals 2 to the first power. Well, any number to the first power is itself, so that's going to be 2. Now, if I have y equals 2 to the second power, well, 2 to the second power is 2 times 2, which is 4. So here are my points, 0, 1, 1, 2, and 2, 4. And I have 3 points that I could now graph. Okay, you're going to practice just creating tables today. Good luck.